The night was thick with smoke and the smell of scorched metal. The wreckage of the transport lay scattered across the alien landscape, twisted and mangled beyond recognition. A single emergency floodlight flickered, casting long shadows over the smoking debris. Ethan Vance coughed, blood and sweat stinging his eyes as he dragged himself through the ruins. His body was battered, every muscle screaming in protest, but he couldn't stop. Not now, not with Kyra still out there, buried beneath the rubble. Ethan had been part of the crew on a desperate evacuation mission. The transport was supposed to be their salvation, a means of escape from the hostile world they'd crashed on. But the universe had other plans. Now all that remained were the charred remains of their hopes. Kyra's breath was weak, a rattle in her chest that nearly drowned out the sound of his footsteps. He finally spotted her half-buried beneath a collapsed bulkhead. Her blue skin, a shade of indigo darker than anything Ethan had seen, shimmered faintly in the floodlight's glow. She wasn't moving. The sight of her, so still and broken, made his heart drop. "No, no, no," he whispered, stumbling forward. His hands, slick with blood, scraped across jagged metal, but he didn't care. The pain in his chest and ribs was nothing compared to the agony of seeing her like this. He fell to his knees beside her, his hands shaking as he pushed the wreckage away. It was heavy, but he had to move it. He had to save her. With a guttural grunt, he heaved the bulkhead off, feeling his body protest with every movement. His heart pounded in his ears, the blood from his wounds mixing with Kyra's indigo blood that was slowly pooling on the ground. Finally, he managed to pull her from the wreckage, her body limp and light in his arms. She was still breathing, weakly, but she was breathing. "Kyra, stay with me," Ethan whispered, cradling her head against his chest. His clothes were soaked in blood, his body on the brink of exhaustion, but he pushed forward. He needed to get her out of here. He needed to survive. As he moved, his legs wobbled beneath him, but he managed to cover a few dozen yards before his strength failed him. He lowered her to the ground, his hands trembling as he tried to find her pulse. It was faint, but it was there. Suddenly, a noise made him freeze. Footsteps heavy, slow, deliberate. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. His eyes darted around the darkness, searching for the source. A cold sweat broke out across his skin. There was no time to hide, no time to run. Figures moved in the shadows, cloaked in armor that absorbed the faint light of the floodlight. Their faces were hidden behind elongated helmets with narrow amber eye slits that glowed faintly in the dark. These were Kira's people. These were the enemy, the ones who had shot them down, the ones who had torn apart the transport and left them stranded. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He tried to stand, but his legs betrayed him. He collapsed back to the ground, his body not obeying his commands. The warriors fanned out, surrounding him. The sound of weapons being drawn filled the air. Kyra stirred beneath him, gasping for breath as her eyes flickered open, glazed with pain. She tried to sit up, but the pain stopped her and she collapsed back with a hiss. "Ethan, what?" She tried to speak, but her voice trailed off as she looked around in confusion. Her eyes widened when she saw the warriors. "No," she whispered, struggling to lift her arm toward the sword at her side. But the sword was too far away. It had fallen from her grasp in the crash. A dark, porous alien blade, its hilt wrapped in weathered sinew, was laying just a few feet away. Ethan's heart dropped as the warriors stepped closer. They were taking their time, savoring the kill. They didn't hurry. They didn't need to. One of the warriors stepped forward. His face, though hidden behind the helmet, had a familiar, almost cruel shape. When the visor of his helmet rose, revealing his face, Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The warrior looked like Kira, but his skin was pale, his eyes filled with cold, triumphant contempt. Ethan's stomach twisted as he recognized him. It was Kira's brother. "Release her," Kira rasped, struggling to sit up. Her voice was weak, but there was a fire in her eyes. "She is mine." Her brother's gaze flickered toward her, his lips curling into a smirk. "You are weak, Kira. I will do what our father could not. I will bring the clan back to strength." Ethan watched helplessly as Kira tried to rise again, but her body couldn't handle the strain. She collapsed back against him, her face pale, her breath shallow. "What are you going to do?" Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible. His eyes darted between the warriors, each one of them looking more menacing than the last. They hadn't drawn their weapons yet, but Ethan could feel the pressure building. They were waiting for something. Kira's brother didn't take his eyes off Ethan. His gaze was cold, calculating. "You don't belong here," he said, his voice low and dangerous. This world is not yours, this sword is not yours. The words struck Ethan harder than any physical blow. The sword, the talon, was an ancient weapon. It was sacred to Kira's people, and now, in the hands of a human, it had caused chaos. It had brought him here into a situation he couldn't understand. His hand instinctively went to the hilt of the sword. It burned, its power pulsing through his hand as though responding to his touch. The pain was sharp, overwhelming. It felt like his very soul was being torn apart. But he couldn't let go. Kira's brother stepped forward, his weapon raised. The energy spear hummed with barely contained power. "You desecrated the talon," he hissed, "and for that you will pay." Ethan clenched his jaw, his fingers tightening around the sword's hilt. The pain grew worse, but he wouldn't release it. He couldn't. Suddenly, the air hummed with a strange resonance. The sword, it wasn't rejecting him anymore. It was changing, responding to him. He couldn't explain it, but the sword was speaking to him. The weapon, the talon, was calling him. The warriors paused, sensing the shift. Even Kira's brother took a step back, his expression flickering between confusion and fear. Ethan's hand clenched tighter around the sword. The burning pain in his arm intensified, but something else began to rise within him, power. Something primal, something ancient. The ground beneath him seemed to tremble, and a deep hum filled the air. And then, without warning, the sword erupted with light. Ethan screamed as the blinding glow burned through him, through his very bones. He didn't let go. The sword, it was alive. It was part of him. The warriors recoiled, their weapons lowering. The light from the blade flooded the area, cutting through the darkness. The tension in the air thickened, and for a moment there was only silence. Then, as quickly as it had begun, the light faded. The warriors, once poised to strike, stood frozen, their eyes wide with fear. Ethan was standing, holding the sword, his muscles trembling with the aftermath of the power he'd just unleashed. But the sword didn't burn anymore. It was simply his. Kira's brother stepped back, eyes filled with disbelief. "Impossible," he whispered. "Impossible," Ethan repeated, his voice thick with exhaustion. "But here we are." The tension was thick, the air so heavy with the weight of what had just happened, it was almost suffocating. Kira's brother, the warrior, his rage bubbling to the surface, took a step forward. "This is not over. You will regret this, human." Kira's voice, though weak, was firm. "Not if we fight together." The warriors waited, watching. The blade hummed softly, as if ready for whatever came next. And then, as if from nowhere, an explosion rocked the ground, shaking the earth beneath them. The horizon flared with light, and distant explosions echoed across the alien landscape. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. The war was coming. The first light of dawn stretched over the jagged horizon, painting the alien sky in harsh yellows and bruised purples. Smoke from the wreckage still curled into the air, carrying the acrid scent of burnt metal and scorched earth. Ethan sat near the cave mouth, the talon heavy in his hand, its porous, dark metal hilt strangely warm despite the night's chill. His ruined palm throbbed, a dull, relentless ache reminding him of the weapon's price. Kira leaned against the rough stone wall beside him, her violet eyes scanning the horizon. The indigo stains of her blood had dried into the cloth bandage wrapped around Ethan's hand, a visible mark of their shared survival. She was alive, barely, but alive, and that was enough for now. "We don't have much time," she said quietly. Her voice, always sharp and commanding, carried the weight of authority despite her injuries. "They'll be back, and when they come, it won't be just a handful of warriors. They'll bring the full force." Ethan nodded. He knew she was right. The enemy clan would not accept a human wielding the talon. That was an affront to their most sacred traditions, a desecration that demanded revenge. And they would come in numbers far beyond what they'd faced last night. He turned his gaze to the defensive perimeter the survivors had managed to erect. Energy barriers flickered faintly in the morning light, powered by a jury-rigged generator patched together from the wrecked transport's hybrid systems. They were fragile, temporary, and entirely human in design. But if his calculations were correct, they could hold for a short while. "Ethan," Kira said, breaking his thoughts, "you understand what this means. The Talon has chosen you. The clan sees it, and so does the enemy. If we survive the next attack, your role, your position will be more than a liability." Ethan flexed his burned fingers, testing the Talon's grip. The pain had dulled into a persistent ache, but the sword was now an extension of his arm rather than a foreign object rejecting him. I didn't choose this, he said quietly. I just want people to survive. And that, Kira replied, may be enough to make you a hero or a target. A chittering sound cut through the morning stillness, sharp and metallic. Ethan's head snapped toward the direction of the noise. Across the rocky terrain, shapes moved just beyond the barrier. Low-slung, six-legged creatures with elongated skulls and glowing eyes, skulkers, nocturnal predators known to hunt in coordinated packs, prowled at the edges of the energy field. Their eyes reflected the early light like burning coals. The warriors stiffened, weapons raised. Even Kira's men, hardened by years of tribal conflict, flinched at the creatures' movements. They were intelligent, methodical, and cruelly efficient killers. If the barriers failed, these beasts would shred anyone caught outside. Ethan didn't hesitate. Despite the pain in his hand and the exhaustion in his limbs, he ran to the generator, his mind racing. He had studied the alien tech in the wreckage last night, deciphering its logic and patching the critical systems. He knew exactly what he had to do. A sharp hiss behind him warned him that the skulkers were testing the barrier. One creature lunged through a weak point in the energy field. A warrior intercepted it, swinging his blade in a deadly arc. The skulker shrieked and collapsed, but Ethan didn't pause. He tore open the generator's access panel and assessed the damage. Inside was chaos. Fractured power conduits, scorched circuit boards, and alien technology fused with human components. It was a nightmare of wires and energy flows. The main coupling that powered the barrier had fractured, interrupting the flow to the perimeter pylons. Ethan gritted his teeth, ignoring the agony shooting through his burned hand. His other hand moved with precise efficiency, bridging wires and bypassing fried circuits. Sweat dripped from his brow as sparks danced dangerously around his fingers. Behind him, the sounds of combat grew. Skulkers broke through weaker points in the defensive line, charging with lethal intent. A warrior screamed as claws raked across his armor. Kira shouted orders, rallying her people, but her voice was hoarse and strained. "Ethan," she called, "hurry or we'll." Her words were cut off by the roar of energy discharges. One of the barrier pylons flickered, failing. Another lurch of sparks illuminated the chaos. Ethan's chest tightened. If he didn't finish this now, the entire camp would be overrun. He tightened his grip on the talon with his burned hand, the sword pulsing softly as if lending him strength. Pain lanced through his forearm, but he ignored it. He had a job to do. One last connection, one final bridge, and the barrier hummed back to life. A pulse of energy surged outward from the perimeter pylons, striking several skulkers mid-leap. Their bodies convulsed in spasms of heat and light, and then the creatures fell silent. The remaining warriors looked around in disbelief. The barrier held for now. Ethan sank to his knees, panting, blood and sweat mingling on his face. The talon lay beside him, still humming faintly, its rhythm in time with his heartbeat. Kira approached, bleeding from a fresh cut on her shoulder, yet her eyes were sharp, assessing. "You saved the perimeter," she said, voice low. "But this won't hold forever. They'll regroup, and they'll bring more." Ethan nodded, flexing his fingers. He knew she was right. This was just the beginning, and somewhere on the horizon he could feel it, the real threat was coming. A shadow fell over them suddenly. Tar, Kira's fiercest warrior, emerged from the cave's shadows. His armor, spattered with blood, gleamed in the morning light. His eyes locked on Ethan, on the talon, and on the proximity of Kira. "This human," Tar growled, his voice a low rumble. "You dare to stand here wielding what is not yours." Ethan straightened, exhausted but resolute. "I wield it to protect lives," he said, "not to claim a title." Tar's jaw tightened. A tense silence hung between them, broken only by the distant sounds of movement. On the horizon, more figures were approaching. Dozens of warriors moving with precision and discipline, their weapons glowing with energy. Kira's violet eyes widened. "They're here," she whispered. The camp froze. The approaching enemy formed a disciplined line, advancing through the rocky terrain with deliberate steps. Weapons hummed, energy flowing through their blades like living currents. Ethan gripped the talon. The sword pulsed, heavier now as if recognizing the magnitude of the challenge. His muscles ached, his body cried out for rest, but he didn't hesitate. "They want the talon," he muttered, "and they'll get it if we let them." Kira's voice, though strained and quiet, carried authority. "Then we fight, but remember they won't stop. And Tar, he may not fight with us this time. Tradition will guide his blade, not your lives." Ethan looked to Tar, who stood rigid, muscles coiled like a predator. His eyes were unreadable, but his intentions were clear. One way or another, the Talon would test him again. The ground trembled slightly under the enemy's approach. Dust rose around their feet. The warriors' weapons glowed brighter, humming with deadly potential. Ethan exhaled, flexing the fingers of his burned hand around the Talon. "Then let them come," he said. And in the distance, a horn sounded. A deep, resonant cry that echoed across the jagged landscape. Not a war cry, but a challenge. The enemy had arrived. The enemy advanced under the harsh twin suns of the alien world, their armor glinting with deadly precision. Ethan stood at the center of the camp, the Talon clutched tightly in his burned hand, its dark, porous metal hilt pulsing faintly, almost like it was alive. Around him, Kira's warriors moved to defensive positions, their weapons at the ready, expressions grim. Only 12 remained from last night's battle, but they were seasoned, disciplined, and loyal to Kira. Ethan's eyes scanned the perimeter. The jury-rigged energy barriers hummed faintly, patched together from the wrecked transport systems. They were fragile, temporary, and human in design, but if they could hold just a little longer, it might give them the edge they needed. "They'll test us first," Kira said, her voice quiet but commanding. Her violet eyes flicked toward the approaching enemy ranks. "They'll probe, looking for weakness. Don't let them see fear." Ethan nodded, muscles tense. Fear was a luxury he couldn't afford, not now. He flexed his burned fingers, the pain a constant reminder that the Talon was no ordinary weapon. It had judged him once, had burned him, had refused to release him, and yet now it seemed almost attuned. A low, chittering growl echoed from the rocky terrain beyond the barriers. Skulkers, the six-legged predators, slithered and paced along the edge of the energy field, their elongated heads cocked with intelligence. Their glowing eyes tracked every movement inside the camp. One misstep, one failure in concentration, and they would tear through the defenses in seconds. "Ethan," Kira snapped, drawing his attention. "The generator, it won't hold if they press too hard." He sprinted to the generator, sweat stinging his eyes. Sparks showered from the patched circuits as he knelt, fingers flying over the controls. His technician's training kicked in, analyzing the alien hybrid system, improvising solutions with what little material they had. "Careful," Kira warned, stepping beside him, blade ready. "They're watching, every move counts." Ethan ignored the pain in his hand, bridging wires, reconnecting fried circuits. A flicker of light shot across the generator. The hum of energy barriers strengthened. He exhaled sharply. "Temporary fix," he muttered, "but it should buy us time." Behind him, the first wave of enemy warriors reached the perimeter. They were disciplined, their movements flawless, a deadly mirror of Kira's own people. Energy spears hummed ominously as they tested the barrier. Sparks flew as the pylons responded, flickering under the assault. Ethan raised the Talon. The sword pulsed in response, as if sensing the danger. Pain flared through his palm, sharp, biting, burning, but he gritted his teeth and held the grip. He had to act. The Talon had chosen him for a reason, and he wasn't about to let the weapon down. Kira's warriors surged forward, meeting the enemy's first line with disciplined precision. Blades clashed. Sparks flew. The sound of metal on metal rang across the rocky landscape, a symphony of chaos and violence. Ethan took a deep breath and stepped forward. He wasn't a warrior. He had no formal training in combat, and yet, as the first enemy soldier lunged at him, the Talon moved in his hand with uncanny precision. Not guided by his will alone, but by something deeper, instinctual, ancient. The sword met the enemy's energy spear with a screech of metal on metal. Pain shot up Ethan's arm, but the Talon absorbed it, redirecting force in ways he couldn't comprehend. His movements were clumsy, desperate, yet effective. The enemy staggered back, stunned by the human who could wield fire in the form of an alien blade. "Keep the line," Kira shouted. Her movements were fluid, precise. She was a blur of indigo blood and steel, cutting through enemies with deadly grace, but even she faltered under the relentless pressure. Her shoulder was already stained, a fresh cut marring her armor. Ethan's eyes caught movement to the flank. A group of skulkers had breached a weak point in the barrier. They lunged toward the wounded warriors. Without thinking, Ethan swung the Talon, cutting a path through the creatures. The blade pulsed with energy, and the first one collapsed in a burst of sizzling blue blood. Another followed. Kira's gaze met his across the battlefield, a mix of surprise and respect flickering in her violet eyes. "You fight like a technician," she yelled over the chaos. Methodical, precise, ineffective. Ethan couldn't respond. He was too focused, too alive in the moment, every nerve alert. The talon guided him, but he felt every strike, every impact, the pain and strain of being human amid gods and monsters. Then, from the center of the enemy formation, a figure stepped forward. Tall, imposing, his armor more elaborate than the rest, a blade similar to the talon gleaming ominously in his grip. Vexen, Kira's estranged cousin, the one who had nearly killed her at the crash site. Ethan froze for a heartbeat, fear gripping him like ice. Vexen's eyes locked onto him, recognizing the human who had wielded the sacred talon. A predator scenting prey. He advanced, every step precise, controlled, a master of combat and cruelty. Human, Vexen called, voice carrying across the battlefield. You dare hold what is not yours, surrender it or die. Ethan's grip tightened. I don't want it for myself, he shouted, voice raw. I hold it to protect those who can't. Vexen laughed, bitter and cruel. Then you will die for them. The two faced each other across the battlefield. Kira lunged forward to intercept Vexen, her blade clashing with his, sparks flying. But her strength was fatting, her wounds slowing her reflexes. Ethan's heart pounded. He was untrained, outmatched, and exhausted. And yet, as Vexen advanced toward him, the talon pulsed, guiding him. His movements were clumsy but effective, instinctual yet precise enough to parry strikes, deflect attacks, and survive. The battlefield blurred around him. Screams, the smell of burning armor, the tang of alien blood, all melded into a chaotic symphony. Every moment counted. Every decision mattered. One misstep, one lapse, and everyone here would die. Then in the chaos, a sharp crack echoed. A pylon nearest the barrier exploded, sending a surge of energy across the battlefield. Warriors on both sides staggered. Vexen hesitated, his strategy disrupted. Ethan seized the moment. The talon felt lighter now, balanced, almost alive in his hands. He pressed forward, instincts guiding him. His strikes, though unpolished, landed true. Vexen faltered for the first time. The crowd of warriors on both sides watched in stunned silence. The human, the outsider, the technician, was holding his own against a master of their most ancient combat traditions. And then, without warning, Vexen lunged with lethal speed. Ethan stumbled, caught off guard, the talon flashing in a desperate, instinctive swing. The collision of blades echoed like thunder. Sparks flew. The talon hummed in Ethan's hands, a pulse of energy radiating outward. Vexen staggered back, his armor scorched, his expression one of disbelief. The battlefield froze, tension thick as stone. Kira's eyes widened as she realized what had happened. The talon had judged again. Ethan's chest heaved. Sweat, blood, and alien ichor stained his clothes. He stood, breathing hard, the talon pulsing softly in his grasp. Vexen's eyes burned with fury. This isn't over, he spat, retreating toward his forces. Ethan looked around. Warriors were watching him, eyes wide with awe and fear. Even Kira's followers hesitated, unsure how to interpret the human who wielded the sacred talon. A voice, low and gravely, whispered from the crowd. He cannot wield a blade, and yet he wields fire itself. Ethan's gaze met Kira's. Her expression was unreadable, a mixture of shock, concern, and the faintest trace of respect. But in the distance, the faint rumble of engines echoed across the rocky terrain. Reinforcements were arriving, more enemy warriors, more danger. Ethan's heart sank. This battle had been survived, but the war was far from over. The sun dipped lower over the jagged horizon, casting long, harsh shadows across the alien terrain. Smoke from the night's fires drifted into the sky, curling like dark fingers against the bruised purple clouds. The camp was tense, every warrior on edge, eyes scanning the distant rocks for the first sign of the next assault. Ethan sat near the generator, the talon resting across his lap. The sword pulsed faintly, as if alive, responding to his heartbeat. His burned hand throbbed, a constant reminder of the weapon's price. He flexed his fingers experimentally, the pain sharp but bearable, now familiar, almost like an old companion. Kira approached, her movements careful despite the blood still staining her armor. She kept a respectful distance, but her violet eyes studied him intently. The bond forged by blood and fire from the previous night's battle lingered between them, unspoken but undeniable. We've held them off so far, she said quietly. But it won't last. Vexen will return and he'll bring the rest of his forces. Ethan nodded, his jaw tight. He understood the truth in her words. The Talon had chosen him, and that choice had made him a target, not just for Vexen and his clan, but possibly for factions within Kira's own people. Tradition ran deep here, and a human wielding the sacred Talon was an affront that some might never forgive. A sudden clatter of footsteps drew their attention. One of the remaining warriors approached, face pale. "Trick," Kira muttered, her voice tense. He wants a word." Ethan's eyes narrowed. Trick, Kira's fiercest warrior, had been hostile toward him from the start. His distrust had been obvious, and now, after everything, he wanted a private conversation. They moved to a quiet corner of the camp. Trick's expression was unreadable, but his eyes burned with quiet intensity. "You understand what this means, human," Trick said, voice low. "The Talon has never chosen an outsider. Your presence here, your survival, has made you an abomination in the eyes of tradition." "I didn't ask for it," Ethan replied, his voice firm despite his exhaustion. "I only want people to survive." Trick's jaw tightened. Survival isn't enough. The Talon chooses for more than protection. It judges, it binds, and it demands. Ethan swallowed, the weight of the truth settling in. What does it demand? Trick's eyes flicked toward Kira, then back to Ethan. "Loyalty, leadership, sacrifice, you've been marked, whether you want it or not." Before Ethan could respond, a sharp, urgent shout rang from the perimeter. "Intruders at the edge of the barrier." Kira and Ethan rushed to the defensive line. Shadows shifted beyond the flickering energy barriers. Reinforcements. Vexen's warriors, more numerous than before, advanced steadily. They moved like a living wave, disciplined and relentless. "Focus," Kira shouted. "Hold the line, Ethan the Talon, you know what to do." Ethan gripped the sword, its pulsing rhythm synchronizing with his heartbeat. He knew instinctively that the Talon would guide him, but he was human, still vulnerable, still flawed. The first wave collided with Kira's warriors. Metal clashed, sparks flew, and the sounds of combat erupted across the camp. Ethan swung the Talon with deliberate precision, the blade cutting through energy spears and armor alike. Pain lanced through his burned hand with every strike, but he didn't release the grip. Then he noticed movement within Kira's ranks. One of her warriors, a tall figure with elaborately carved armor, faltered. Hesitation. And then a subtle but unmistakable act, a hand sign, a signal toward the enemy. Ethan froze, heart pounding. Betrayal. Someone in Kira's camp was working with Vexen. Before he could react, the barrier flared and flickered. A skulker burst through the weakened section, claws outstretched. One of Kira's loyal warriors tried to intercept, but the creature tore through him, sending blood and ichor spraying across the ground. "Cover that flank," Kira yelled, spinning to meet the attack. Her movements were fluid, deadly, but even she was stretched thin. Ethan's mind raced. He needed to act fast, both to protect the perimeter and uncover the traitor. The Talon pulsed again, heavier now, almost urging him forward. He swung at a group of approaching enemies, instinct guiding every move. Sparks and blood flew as the sword cut with precision he didn't consciously control. And then a shadow detached itself from the enemy ranks. Trick. He had moved toward Ethan, blade drawn, eyes locked on the Talon. "Stand aside," Trick said, his voice low but firm. "You don't understand what you're doing. The Talon isn't yours to wield." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "I don't care about tradition. I care about survival. Right now, that means holding the line." Trick hesitated. For a moment, his expression softened. Then, a hiss of movement from behind caught Ethan's attention. More enemy warriors were pressing in, flanking them, exploiting the momentary distraction. Kira shouted, "No, focus!" She lunged at Vexen's lieutenants, cutting a path through the enemy, but the numbers were overwhelming. Ethan felt the Talon respond, almost intuitively. He moved, parried, struck, his body and mind synced in a brutal dance of survival. The burning in his hand flared with each motion, but he gritted his teeth, forcing himself forward. And then, with a sudden, gut-wrenching realization, he saw it, the traitor in Kira's camp. The subtle signal, the hesitation, the fleeting glance toward Vexen. It was one of the elder warriors, respected and trusted by all. Betrayal. Ethan's blood ran cold. This wasn't just a fight against Vexen's forces. This was a war being undermined from within. Before he could act, a spear of energy came hurtling toward Kira. She didn't see it in time. "Kyra," Ethan screamed. Time slowed. The Talon pulsed violently, as if sensing danger. Ethan lunged forward, muscles screaming, burning hand driving him beyond his limits. The sword met the incoming spear mid-flight, a blinding flash erupting from the collision. The energy discharge knocked both Ethan and Kira off their feet. Sparks flew, metal screamed, and the battlefield froze for a heartbeat. Kira's eyes met Ethan's, wide with shock and pain. "You saved me." Ethan struggled to rise, talon heavy in his grip, exhaustion threatening to collapse him. The betrayer was retreating, realizing their cover had been blown. But the enemy pressed forward, relentless and unyielding. The camp had survived the first assault, barely. But Ethan knew the truth. The battle was lost in more ways than one. Betrayal ran deep. The enemy would return, and next time there might be no second chance. Ethan realizes the Talon's power may force him into leadership he never wanted, and that someone he trusted from Kira's own ranks has betrayed them. The camp lay in uneasy silence as the sun set, painting the alien sky in harsh streaks of orange and bruised purple. Smoke from the previous day's battles drifted lazily across jagged rocks, carrying the acrid scent of scorched armor and alien ichor. Ethan knelt by the generator, the Talon lying across his lap, still pulsing faintly as if alive. His burned hand throbbed steadily, a persistent reminder of the sword's judgment. Kira moved among her warriors, tending to the wounded. Her violet eyes were sharp, calculating, and always aware of every detail. Only 11 warriors remained from the previous day's skirmish, every casualty a painful reminder of the stakes. Ethan looked at her, voice low. "We can't hold them forever. They know about the Talon now. They'll bring everything they've got." Kira's eyes flicked to the horizon where shadows were already shifting. "I know, and there's more," she said. "The traitor within the camp, we can't ignore it." Ethan's heart sank. The elder warrior who had betrayed them yesterday had vanished, but their act of treachery had already put the entire camp at risk. "We'll deal with them," he said. "But first, we survive this night." The shadows coalesced into distinct shapes. More enemy warriors advanced, disciplined, their weapons humming with energy. Vexen led them, his pale blue skin gleaming in the dim light, eyes locked on the human who had dared to wield the Talon. Behind him, the enemy lines moved with precision, flanking the camp from two sides. Kira's warriors scrambled into position. "Focus on the weak points. Ethan, the Talon, you're with me." Ethan nodded, gripping the sword. Pain flared in his hand with every movement, but the Talon seemed to guide him, its dark, porous surface pulsing in rhythm with his heart. The first assault began with a roar. Vexen's lieutenants pushed forward, energy spears arcing toward Kira's line. Ethan moved instinctively, the Talon slicing through blades and armor with a force he barely understood. Sparks flew, metal screamed, and the smell of burning alien blood filled the air. But then the real danger emerged. The barrier's generator sputtered. Flickers of energy cascaded across the perimeter pylons. A skulker lunged through the weakest point, claws extended. One of Kira's warriors intercepted, but the creature tore through him, leaving a trail of blue ichor across the rocks. Ethan's eyes darted around. The betrayer's hand was at work again, subtle signals guiding enemy movements toward the camp's vulnerable points. His jaw clenched. He had to act fast. "Hold the line," Kira shouted. "Protect the wounded." Ethan lunged, the Talon pulsing in response to his movements. He intercepted a skulker mid-leap, slicing through its armored head. Another enemy soldier advanced, energy spear aimed at Kira. Without thinking, Ethan swung the Talon, deflecting the attack and knocking the enemy off balance. The Talon burned in his hand, but the pain was different now, less punishing, more like a pressure guiding his movements. He realized that he was beginning to adapt to it, as if the sword and his mind were merging. Kira's eyes widened in shock. "You're learning faster than I expected." "Doesn't mean I'm ready for leadership," Ethan muttered, swinging the Talon again to deflect a strike aimed at a wounded warrior. Amid the chaos, Trick appeared, moving toward Ethan with deliberate precision. His blade gleamed in the dim light, and his expression was unreadable. "Step aside," Trick said. "You don't understand what you're doing. That sword isn't yours to wield." "I wield it to keep people alive," Ethan snapped. "That's all it's for." Trick hesitated. His eyes flicked to the flanking enemy soldiers, then back to Ethan. "Then prove it," he said quietly. "Survive this night, and we'll see if you deserve the Talon." Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the camp. One of the energy pylons was destroyed, sending a surge through the barrier. Enemy warriors poured through the opening, and chaos erupted anew. Ethan's heart pounded. He slashed at one enemy, parried another, his movements instinctive, fueled by desperation. Kira fought beside him, her blade a deadly blur. Sparks flew as the talon collided with energy weapons again and again. Then came the moment Ethan had feared. Vexen advanced toward him, cutting through the chaos with a predator's focus. His eyes locked on the talon. "Human," he hissed, "the blade belongs to my clan. Surrender it or die." Ethan's grip tightened. "I don't want it for myself. I hold it to protect lives, yours included, if you give me the chance." Vexen sneered, circling him. "You know nothing of what it demands. You will fail." And then a sudden shock. From the flank, the traitor attacked, moving with lethal precision toward Kira. Ethan reacted instantly, the talon pulsing violently in his hand. Pain shot through his arm as he swung, intercepting the attack midair. Sparks flew, the force sending both forward. Kira gasped, staggering, her shoulder cut anew. Ethan caught her, talon still raised, eyes wide with realization. The enemy's reinforcements were overwhelming. Every second counted. "Ethan," Kira shouted, "we can't hold them forever." He shook his head, jaw tight. "Then we improvise." He lunged toward the generator, quickly assessing the wiring, circuits, and energy conduits. His fingers moved with a technician's precision, improvising, rerouting power, bypassing damaged sections. Every movement sent waves of agony through his burned hand, but the talon guided him, the pain less like punishment, more like a warning, a tether. A surge of energy coursed through the pylons. The barrier pulsed violently, sending a shockwave across the battlefield. Enemy warriors were thrown back, their weapons sputtering and shorting out. The skulkers shrieked, retreating. Ethan stumbled back, chest heaving, sweat and blood mixing across his face. The talon pulsed faintly in his hand, as if satisfied for now. Kira looked at him, awe and relief in her eyes. "You saved the camp," she said softly. "But at what cost? The talon, it's marking you more than anyone can understand." Ethan's gaze swept the battlefield. The enemy had been repelled, but only temporarily. Vexen was still alive, still moving, still calculating, and somewhere within their camp the traitor had survived. Ethan felt the weight of the sword in his hand, its pulse a reminder that leadership and responsibility had been thrust upon him. Not by choice, but by the talon's judgment. The distant horizon shimmered with movement. Another wave was coming, stronger, larger. And this time, survival might not be enough. Ethan realizes that even if the camp survives, the talon has marked him irrevocably. Leadership, responsibility, and the judgment of the clan and the traitor within are now inescapable. Night fell like a shroud over the alien landscape, the sky painted in deep purples and bruised blues. Smoke from the previous day's battles drifted across jagged rock formations, carrying the sharp scent of scorched metal and alien ichor. Ethan knelt beside the generator, the talon lying across his lap, pulsing faintly with an almost sentient rhythm. Every throb in his burned hand reminded him that the sword was more than a weapon. It was a judge, a tether, a curse. Kira moved among the remaining warriors, bloodied but unwavering. Only 10 remained, each warrior exhausted yet resolute. Their eyes flicked toward the distant horizon where movement shimmered in the faint moonlight. The enemy had returned. Vexen's forces were advancing, disciplined, numerous, and determined. Ethan rose slowly, flexing his hand around the talon. "We can't hold them forever," he said quietly, "but we can make them pay for every step they take." Kira nodded, her violet eyes hard. "The talon has chosen you. That choice gives you more than power, it gives you responsibility. The enemy wants you dead because of it, so do some within our camp." Ethan froze, the traitor. He had to find the saboteur before it was too late. A shrill cry rose from the perimeter. Sparks flared as one of the energy pylons exploded under fire. Skulkers and enemy warriors surged through the opening. Chaos erupted instantly. Ethan ran forward, the talon humming with energy, almost guiding his movements. His instincts took over. He swung, parried, and struck with precision that belied his lack of formal combat training. Sparks and alien blood flew as energy blades collided with the talon, each strike sending pain lancing up his arm. Yet somehow he survived. Kira fought alongside him, her blade a blur of indigo and steel. Her shoulder was cut anew, but her movements were lethal. Together, they pushed back wave after wave of attackers. Then Ethan spotted him, the traitor. the elder warrior who had sent subtle signals to Vexen's forces. He moved with calculated precision, aiming to strike Kira from behind. Ethan's heart raced. "No," he shouted. Instinct propelled him forward. The talon pulsed violently, almost reacting before he moved. With a desperate lunge, he intercepted the elder warrior's strike, swinging the blade with all the force he could muster. Sparks erupted as steel met the talon. The traitor staggered, his weapon clattering to the ground. Kira turned in time to strike, her blade cutting a clean line across the elder's armor. The traitor collapsed, bloodied but alive, groaning in defeat. Ethan's hand throbbed painfully, but he didn't let go. The talon had guided him, protected Kira, and now justice had been served for the moment. But there was no time to celebrate. Across the battlefield, Vexen advanced with terrifying precision, his blade similar to the talon gleaming in the moonlight. He moved like a predator, eyes locked on Ethan. "You," Vexen hissed, "the human who dares to wield the talon, die." Ethan tightened his grip on the sword. Fear lanced through him, but he had no choice. The talon pulsed, heavier now, yet familiar in his hands. Every instinct, every nerve, every ounce of human ingenuity converged into the moment. They clashed, sparks and energy surged as talon met Vexen's blade. Ethan's burned hands screamed with each impact, yet he held firm. The talon seemed alive, guiding him just enough to survive, just enough to counter, but not to dominate. Each strike was raw, desperate, human, yet effective. Kira fought beside him, her movements deadly and precise. Together they pushed Vexen back, though he was relentless. He recovered quickly from each strike, exploiting every opening. Ethan realized something terrifying. This wasn't just combat. This was a test, a ritual of power, a judgment upon him as the wielder of the talon. The battlefield became a blur of motion, sparks, and alien blood. Warriors on both sides fought with fury, yet the focus was clear. The human with the talon was the pivot upon which the battle turned. Then in a split second, Vexen feinted left, spinning right with blinding speed. Ethan stumbled, untrained and exhausted, but the talon pulsed, guiding his hand into a defensive arc. Their blades met, and the impact reverberated through his arm, sending waves of pain to his chest. Time seemed to slow. The talon moved with him, an extension of instinct, intuition, and something deeper, something almost conscious. Vexen froze mid-spin, his killing strike turned to vulnerability. Ethan pressed forward, talon at his throat. Vexen's eyes burned with disbelief and rage. "You, a human." Ethan's chest heaved. Sweat, blood, and exhaustion weighed on him, yet he held the talon steady. "I don't want to lead," he said, voice raw. "I just want this fighting to stop." For a heartbeat, the battlefield went silent. Warriors on both sides watched in awe, confusion, and fear. The talon pulsed faintly, a reminder of its ancient authority. Vexen lowered his eyes, voice trembling with fury and defeat. "You survive by the talon, Will." Ethan stepped back, talon heavy in his hands. The sword's guidance faded, leaving him human again, battered, exhausted, but alive. The enemy forces hesitated, then retreated, Vexen among them, nursing wounds and fury. Kira approached, her own blade still drawn, indigo blood streaking her armor. She examined Ethan's hand and the talon, her eyes reflecting a mix of awe, concern, and something deeper. "You've done it," she whispered. "The prophecy, the talon it has judged." Ethan looked around at the camp. Warriors lowered their weapons, submission and respect evident in their posture, not for him, but for the talon. And then Kira stepped forward, her bloodied hand reaching for his. She lifted it high for all to see, a gesture of claim, trust, and bond, one that transcended species, tradition, and expectation. Gasps ran through the assembled warriors. The outsider had not only survived, but the talon had judged him worthy, and through him, the clan had been spared. Ethan's chest heaved. Relief, exhaustion, and the weight of responsibility pressed down on him. The talon's pulse was steady now, almost content. But beyond the camp, in the darkness, distant engines hummed. Reinforcements. The war was not over. The battles might have ended for now, but the true test of the human's ingenuity, courage, and compassion was only beginning. Ethan has survived the decisive battle and earned the talon's grudging respect. But distant enemy reinforcements signal that a larger, more dangerous assault is imminent, and the human may now be forced into permanent leadership he never wanted. The first light of dawn stretched across the jagged alien horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples and sharp yellows. Smoke from the previous night's fires drifted lazily into the wind, carrying the scent of scorched metal and alien ichor. The battlefield lay silent, the aftermath of chaos etched into every rock and scarred surface. Warriors from both sides stood in uneasy proximity, weapons lowered, eyes wide with awe and disbelief. Ethan Vance knelt by the generator, the talon resting across his lap. Its dark, porous surface pulsed softly, synchronized with his heartbeat. His burned hand throbbed steadily, a dull ache reminding him of the weapon's judgment. But now he understood it better. The talon wasn't just a weapon. It was a test, a force of authority, and a measure of human will. Kira approached, her violet eyes scanning the survivors. Only a handful remained, 12 warriors battered, bloodied, and exhausted. Her armor was streaked with indigo blood, her shoulder cut and bruised, yet her posture remained rigid, unbroken. She had survived, and so had he together. The camp was still, the battlefield quiet except for the distant stirrings of retreating enemy forces. Vexen and his lieutenants had vanished beyond the horizon, nursing wounds and pride alike. The Talon had judged, and the human had endured. Kira stepped forward, her hand reaching for Ethan. Slowly, deliberately, she lifted his burned hand high for all to see. The gesture was a declaration, a bond, a coronation. Gasps ran through the remaining warriors. The outsider, the human, had been accepted not by tradition but by the Talon. "I burned for us," Kira said softly, voice carrying across the quiet battlefield. "I bleed for him." Ethan's chest tightened. He had not sought this role, had not desired leadership, yet the weight of the Talon and the survival of the clan now rested on his shoulders. He looked around at the warriors, some wary, some reverent, all alive because of his choices. "Everyone regroup," he called. His voice, hoarse but steady, carried authority he hadn't expected to find in himself. "Tend the wounded, prepare the perimeter. We don't know if Vexen will return." The warriors moved quickly, obeying instinct and training. The talon pulsed faintly in Ethan's hands, almost as if approving his command. Kira walked beside him, leaning lightly against him for support. "You've done more than survive," she said quietly. "You've given this clan a chance, a future." Ethan shook his head, humility and exhaustion battling with the weight of responsibility. "I just did what had to be done. The Talon guided me, yes, but humans, we improvise, we endure, we adapt. That's what kept us alive." Her violet eyes softened, "And that perhaps is why it chose you." The sun rose higher, casting harsh light across the camp. Shadows of the fallen enemy stretched long, a reminder that the battle was over, but the war was far from finished. The Talon pulsed in Ethan's hand, a tether, a reminder, a challenge. It had chosen him, and its judgment was irrevocable. Beyond the camp, the alien terrain stretched endlessly. Rocky spires, twisted thorn plants, and jagged cliffs marked the horizon. Somewhere out there, Vexen's forces regrouped, planning, waiting. But Ethan was no longer just a human technician. He was a symbol, proof that compassion, ingenuity, and courage could transcend species, culture, and tradition. Kira's gaze met his. "The enemy will return," she said, "and next time it won't just be a raid, it will be a full assault." Ethan tightened his grip on the Talon. "Then we'll be ready, together." The warriors glanced at him, seeing not just a human, but a leader forged in fire, bonded by blood and purpose, standing beside their chief. Respect rippled through the ranks, mingled with awe and cautious hope. The distant hum of approaching engines reminded them that the threat was far from gone. But Ethan no longer felt fear. The Talon had chosen him, and with it, the survival of the clan now rested in human hands. He looked to Kira, their shared blood and struggle binding them in ways tradition could not define. "Whatever comes," he said quietly, "we face it together." Her violet eyes glimmered with determination and something softer, almost like hope. "Together," she agreed. The camp stirred, warriors moving with purpose, rebuilding, preparing, healing. The Talon pulsed once more, a steady heartbeat in Ethan's hand, and then stilled as if content for now. And beyond the jagged horizon, the first signs of the returning enemy flickered in the dawn light. Ethan exhaled, muscles tense, Talon ready. "Let them come," he whispered. "We're ready." The sun rose fully over the alien world, casting long shadows across the battlefield. The outsider had become the leader. The Talon had judged, and humanity had proven itself once again resourceful, compassionate, and indomitable. Yet in the distance, beyond the rocky cliffs and thorn plains, something stirred. A shadow of a threat far greater than Vexen, waiting, watching, and ready to challenge the new chief in ways he could not yet imagine. Ethan's fingers tightened around the talon. He was ready for the challenge. The dawn had come. Ethan had survived, the Talon had judged him, and the clan had a chance at survival. But the pulse of the alien world whispered of new dangers. Greater enemies, ancient forces, and trials beyond comprehension awaited, a future where humanity's ingenuity and courage would once again be tested. The story ends with victory, but the horizon hints at adventures, political intrigue, and battles yet to come. Humanity, indomitable and ever adaptive, had earned its place, and the Talon's legacy had only begun.